If a supernatural super beast invaded your home and began terrorizing your family members, what would you do? Turns out, mommy and daddy lied about the monster in the closet. He's not just real, he's a real piece of crap. The kind that preys exclusively on people when they're at their most vulnerable. Once he gets inside your home, he won't stop until everyone's dead. That is, unless you can find a way to stomp his lights out first. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the boogeyman in The Boogeyman. Will is a psychologist, although more recently, he's been the one in need of therapy. After losing his wife in a random car accident, he's left to care for his two daughters, Sadie and Sawyer, by himself, all while balancing the needs of his various patients. The good news is, they're all more or less stable enough for him to feel comfortable holding sessions out of his home. That is, until he meets his newest client. The man who just walked into Will's house without knocking is one Lester Billings, and he's clearly not doing so well, even going as far as to tacitly threaten acts of violence against himself or others if he gets turned away. And it only gets weirder from there. Dude seems utterly terrified of the open closet door, all but outright refusing to say anything further until it's shut. However, after hearing what's brought him in, I think we should have probably have left it open. You see, it turns out he's super bummed out lately because everyone thinks he murdered his 3 young children. Oh, but don't worry, he's totally innocent. And if his word's not enough for you, just check out his hand-drawn rendition of who he claims to be the real killer.
What is this supposed to be?
Thing that comes for your kids when you're not paying attention.
Right.
Look, I can understand how someone in Will's line of work might be willing to bend his own rule about phone screening new patients to help someone in dire need of counseling. But you gotta remember, this is where his own children sleep. And now he's got some wacko sitting across from him talking about how a fairy tale might bump off his entire family. I'd say this is 100% the situation his pre-session interview policy was designed to prevent. At the very least, I would have told Lester to wait for me outside and talked with him out in the front of the house after locking myself out. We can have Sadie let us back inside once the coast is clear. That is assuming she ever takes her goddamn earbuds out. Side note, I hate those things. Sure, just go ahead and crank whatever poor situational awareness you had all the way down to 0. About the only use I can actually see for them is when you're stuck on a plane, in which case you're pretty much already screwed if something goes wrong. And on that note, let's get into this video's sponsor, Raycon. With their high-quality noise-isolating fit, you'll never hear the psychopaths sneaking up to murder you. Head on down to the link in the description and use offer code HELPLESSVICTIM to get 0% off your newest pair of horse blinders. Nerds, failure to prepare your body is preparing for your body to fail you at the worst moment. Don't expect a diet consisting solely of Chick-fil-A and Reign energy drinks will fuel your meat pistons and gray goo at overclock speeds with a vicious lunatic hot on your ass. If you want to stand a chance, you should get some AG1 into your cells. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement with a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients that aid your brain, gut, and immune system. Rhodiola, magnesium, and B vitamins will help keep your wits over sustained periods of time without the coffee crash. But hey, why not both? Powerful plant extracts, adaptogenic herbs, and antioxidants keep your mitochondria power plants running at full steam. Vitamin C, zinc, and functional mushrooms keep your white blood cells and immune system ready for biological threats. Biotin, zinc, and other nutrients keep your nails thick and strong, so you have a better chance at scratching your attacker for DNA evidence the forensics team could scrape off your lifeless body and use to put the perp behind bars. All this for a few scoops and a few gulps of mild-tasting, earthy water. That's a solid trade, but don't just take my word for it. Try AG1 for yourself by clicking the link in the description below to get a free 1-year supply of AG Vitamin D3 plus K2 plus 5 AG1 travel packs with your first purchase of AG1. Alright, getting back to Will's situation. He totally makes the right call by contacting the police, especially after finding out Lester specifically sought him out upon hearing about his wife's untimely end. Where he goes wrong, however, is leaving this guy completely unsupervised to do so. And now he's gone. Awesome. Instead of just blindly assuming an obviously disturbed man wouldn't cause problems the moment Will left the room, we should have tried texting 911 for help instead. There's a large and ever-expanding list of areas across the United States where this is possible, so it's always worth a shot even if you're unsure whether it'll work. In the case that it doesn't, however, Will could still text Sadie and have her call on his behalf. Sure, it might seem a little rude to start texting while some sad sack is spilling his guts to you, but you know what else is rude? Sneaking off into someone's home like an absolute lurkatron. Fortunately for everyone involved, he doesn't make it very far.
There's a man in the house.
Dude really takes hide and seek seriously. For real though, knowing his daughter was home from school, Will should have called her the second he lost track of that nut job and had her hunker down in her room until he gave the all clear, even if it's just to spare her the trauma of seeing something like this. Besides, for all he knew, the guy was intent on making the Harpers one big happy family again. Oh well, what's done is done. Only thing we can do now is find a way to live with the fact some Reno decided to hang out in her closet. That said, the girls really don't seem all that broken up about it, least of all Sawyer, whose primary concern still seems to be keeping the boogeyman at bay. Lucky for her, her father's always willing to brave the darkened depths of her bedroom closet to check for any child-eating monsters. Only this time, it seems he might have missed a spot. Don't worry, it's probably just your imagination scurrying around down there. Still, you'd think Will might react to the sound of someone making a dynamic entry into his daughter's bedroom. What, does everyone in this family walk around wearing AirPods? Apparently so, as young Sawyer doesn't even make an attempt at calling in backup. But like, why though? You already callously sent your own father to be devoured by closet creatures before you even had any evidence they existed. And now that you got one jonesing for a game of night crawlers, you don't even make a peep? What the heck are they teaching you at school? Animals are generally frightened by loud noises, so screaming at the top of your lungs could potentially drive it away. And if it's not an animal, well, then you're probably dead either way. So at least try warning your family members about the god-awful boogin crawling around in the shadows. What I really don't understand, however, is why someone so utterly terrified of the dark would proceed to stick her head under the bed where the creature might be patiently waiting to gobble her up, even with that bizarro light globe thing. Nice. Well, at least small coffins run cheaper. That is assuming there's anything left of her to bury. We may only need a travel mug. Seriously though, how many times leading up to this do you think she called for her parents when something went bump in the night? Now the one time she's actually got a prairie fire emergency on her hands, she decides to sort it out herself. Fail. Except by some miracle, Sawyer isn't immediately eaten alive by El Chupacabra. In fact, it even lets her run on over to Sadie's room to futilely report the entire experience. Classic, you're a child, therefore everything you say must be make-believe. Then again, who in their right mind would actually believe a demon from hell picked here and now to yeet itself into existence? The more likely scenario, as Sadie sees it, is that Sawyer's loose tooth is giving her nightmares, so the pair sets out to deal with it the old-fashioned way. God, I wish. Nah, instead they just tie it to a stupid door and do it that way. However, unlike your typical dad, Sadie actually listens when her sister chickens out at the last second. The monster, on the other hand, not so much.
We don't have to do it.
Honestly, good on old whateveritis for knowing how to get done. No way Sawyer was ever gonna let her go through with it counting down like that. So yeah, at this point I think it's safe to say something strange is going on around here. Sure, it's pretty significant leap in logic to connect to this incident with some kind of nocturnal infant annihilator, but that thing very clearly did not close on its own. Like, I get that sudden pressure changes can slam a door shut, but that would require some other door or window to be wide open, as well as some fairly turbulent weather conditions outside. All things that would be pretty easy to verify. Of course, absent any concrete evidence of evil afoot, all we can do is keep our eyes peeled for any further paranormal activity. Although, if I'm Sawyer right now, I'd definitely be wedging a chair against my closet door for pretty much the rest of my life. The following night, after a painfully unhelpful therapy session, Sadie starts looking into Lester Billings out of suspicion their strange encounters might be somehow connected to his death, prompting her to sneak into her dad's office to try and find more information. The search ultimately turns up Lester's discarded notepad, which, upon tracing over, reveals a disturbing image of whatever that is. Meanwhile, Sawyer is once again awakened in the middle of the night, only this time it's by her older sister, or so she thinks. The sound lures her out into the hallway, where she once again tries rolling her globe light towards the source of the disturbance. It goes about how you'd expect. Great. Maybe try asking Daddy for a flashlight this Christmas so you don't have to forfeit your sole source of illumination just to maybe see what's lurking in the shadows. If that were me in this situation, I'd head back into my bedroom and lock myself in with the lights on until morning. Fact is, it's either Sadie playing a trick on us or it's not, and in either case, we'll gain absolutely nothing by going to investigate. Instead, she decides to take matters into her own hands and furiously attack her older sister, only to immediately cease her flurry of tiny girl kicks the moment she lays eyes on the notepad. Evidently, this thing is the very same creature she saw skirting under her bed last night, which can only mean one thing. They both played until dawn and got freaked out by the Wendigos. Okay, alright, I guess it could also mean this thing actually exists, but looking at it from Sadie's perspective, which do you think is more likely? That the boogeyman is real, or that the sight of Madman's fever dream corrupted Sawyer's recollection of the night before? All the same, little sis should immediately explain what just went down in the hall. After all, closet monsters might be a thing, but violent home invaders definitely are. As for bringing their dad into the loop, it's tempting, but given their lack of evidence and everything they've been through as a family, he'll almost certainly write it off as some kind of stress-induced paranoia. Probably even sprinkle in a little big brain psychology jargon to drive the point across. In that case, we'll want to hold off until we find something he can't deny. And what better way to prove the existence of a mythical creature than with a grainy, out-of-focus photographic evidence? I'm joking, of course. We'll need something legit. To that end, I say we head on down to the nearest Bass Pro and pick up a couple trail cameras. You can find cheaper models for well under $100 that even a broke high school student like Sadie might be able to afford. Whatever this thing is, it seems fixated on Sawyer for some reason. So we'll start by hiding one in her room. Of course, proving its existence is only half of the battle. We'll also need to figure out how to get rid of it. Either that or cash in on YouTube fame by making the most realistic no-sleep videos to ever exist. Either way, posting the footage online might help us connect with someone who knows what we're dealing with and whether it can be brutally shot to death. Ultimately, Sadie decides to maintain her focus on their recent house guest. The next day after school, she has a friend to drive her to Lester's former residence in search of anything that might shed some light on the current situation. And right away, it's pretty obvious she found the right place. That said, before we went barging in through the back door with reckless abandon, it would have been a good idea to look over his new patient form in case he left an emergency contact number. Speaking with someone who knew him personally might save us some time, or even help us make sense of any clues we uncover. Besides, Lester only said his kids bought the farm. He didn't say anything about his wife, let alone whatever mental state she might be in.
This some kind of a dare? Think it'd be fun to get off on our misery?
Yeah, kinda. Gotta say, given the state of this place, I would have thought she'd be in more of a shoot first, ask questions never kind of mood. Yet another reason why you shouldn't go trespassing in someone's home unless you're absolutely certain they're all dead. Then again, Sadie should have realized she wasn't home alone as soon as she saw the candles all over the place. The strange woman is Lester's widow, Rita, and unsurprisingly, she's not at all interested in talking about her husband's death. That is until Sadie produces the copy she made from his sketch of the night terror. Upon hearing about their recent encounters, she explains that the creature must have jumped from her family to theirs when Lester checked out. Evidently, it spreads through trauma like the shapeshifter in Smile, which certainly explains why he seeked them out after hearing about their recent loss. And just how does Rita know all this, by the way? Well, Sadie never asks, nor does she ask why they go through the trouble of setting up some kind of Ruby Goldberg Polaroid contraption contraption, instead of going with a simple trail camera like I suggested earlier. What we do find out is that this uses darkness to hide. We also learn that water is wet and the Kennedys are, in fact, all gun shy. Sadly, before we can pick up any other nuggets of wisdom, old Boogie Boy drops in for another visit. Well, maybe. It could just be an excuse for this random crazy person to start acting all crazy and random.
I see you, you son of a...
Well, that was helpful. About the only useful thing we actually learned from this encounter is how it moves from family to family, which does give us a nuclear option to save the rest of the household should all else fail. Suffice it to say, we did just have to comb the obituaries until we find something especially brutal, and then pay their loved ones a visit they'll never forget. For now, I think our best option is to try and exercise as much control over the lighting as we possibly can to keep this thing from getting the drop on us. Of course, if it can manipulate electricity like we saw earlier, there's no telling what else it could do to keep us in the dark. So our best bet is to arm ourselves with as many options as possible. In that case, we should have Bethany drive us over to the nearest sporting goods store so we can pick up some emergency chem lights and survival candles. A few weapons couldn't hurt either, but until we get Will on board, firearms will be out of the question, unless we have the right connections. That said, we still could pick up some machetes and crossbows, assuming they fall within Sadie's financial means. One thing's for sure, I wouldn't rest until I found a way to prove the monster's existence. Fact is, unless they can win their dad over, Sadie and Sawyer don't even have enough autonomy to mount a proper defense. Sure, they could play the emotional distress card for a little while longer, but eventually they'll have to go to school, costing us a significant portion of our available time. Ideally, we'd want to flip our circadian rhythm to only sleep under daylight, kinda like one of my writers. This will ensure we can remain vigilant when it's most likely to be active, and unless it can turn off the sun, this should keep it off our backs while we sleep. I'd also want to minimize the amount of permanently dark spaces around the house as much as possible. This means tearing down all the closet doors and removing pretty much all furniture, including our beds. We could even sell it all in a garage sale to bolster our defense budget. Speaking of which, if we're going to kill this thing, we'll need to draw it out of hiding, and that means doing it in the dark. However, while we know for sure it avoids light in the visible spectrum, that doesn't mean we can't try catching it under nods. If it were up to me, I'd have Will cash out his IRA to kit the whole brood out in dual tubes and IR illuminators. If it's at all possible to kill the boogeyman through conventional means, I'd imagine hammering it with a Scar 17S 15 times ought to do it. Otherwise, we could try hitting it with intense beams of UV light, in case it works in the same way as the Shadow Witch in Lights Out. I'm definitely no expert on that, but something like the Magnaflux EV6000 looks like it would probably get the job done. And it would also be worth having a conventional high candela spotlight just to make sure we have all of our bases covered. Unfortunately, Sadie chooses to do literally nothing toward improving the situation, and instead continues sulking over her dead mom, as though she and the rest of her family aren't about to join her. Nah, I know what'll kick the creeper out. A good old-fashioned slumber party with all the girlfriends that low-key can't stand to be around her. That's what Sadie thinks, apparently. Although, unless she plans on boring it to death, I don't think this is gonna cut it. But just when it seems like everyone's about to bail, they suddenly remember Sadie has a room in her house where some dude did the unalive. And what better way to spice things up than a little 7 minutes in heaven with a closet monster? Well, don't leave him hanging. This is precisely why it is not a good idea to have friends over when you're 90% sure the place is being haunted. Best case scenario, this was going to be a complete waste of time. Worst case scenario, well, that's pretty much this. Lucky for Sadie, she's able to bust her way out before things get real. According to her so-called friends, the door became stuck after Regina George slammed it shut, but that doesn't stop her from slapping the out of Blondie in an act of well-deserved retribution. The others don't see it that way, however, and the party fizzles out about as quickly as the Netflix series. It's a real shame, actually. We could have used them to lure the bastard into a photo shoot. The good news is that now we know for a fact this thing is a thing. Unfortunately, so does Sawyer. game over. You know, I gotta wonder why someone who up until now has shown extreme fear of the dark, which could have only been dramatically worsened by recent events, would be sitting alone playing video games in near total darkness with her back to an open room. That honestly seems like one of the scariest possible environments for someone in her position, monsters or no. Oh well, it all works out in the end. It seems, despite being heaved across the room like a rag doll, Sawyer makes a full recovery almost immediately. Still, the whole experience is enough for Sadie to break down and tell her dad that Lester's boogeyman is very much real. Predictably, Will doesn't believe her, because of course he doesn't. Yeah, I guess Sawyer was just raging so hard at her game she hurled her entire body at the screen out of sheer frustration, which might be entirely possible if she was playing Hell Let Loose. Still, you can hardly blame someone for not immediately accepting something so insane. Problem is, we seem to be running out of time. The monster is growing more aggressive with each encounter, and there's no telling when it might decide to go in for the kill. In that case, our only option is to put him down for good, and I think I might just have an idea. He's in there! Jokes aside, we're definitely looking at an uphill battle. We still have no idea how to kill this thing, assuming it can even be killed at all. And even if we did, we have no real weapons to speak of. What we do have, however, is a tentative ally in the form of Rita, and it turns out she has a plan not unlike that of Major Payne. Instead of lighting up the closet, she's rigged up the main hallway in her house with a gauntlet of tripwire shotgun shells, which she apparently plans to kill it with. Yeah, here's the thing. Without some kind of barrel to reinforce the shell and contain the expanding propellant gases, she's pretty much just lined the wall with party poppers. Regardless of whatever load she's using, the buckshot won't be able to reach anything even remotely close to lethal velocity, making this entire setup a colossal waste of ammunition. About the only way I could see this working would be if she put each round inside its own steel tube measuring somewhere around 8 inches in length. At this range, that would provide more than enough gas pressure to do some serious damage. At least to something fleshy, anyway. But let's assume for a second she's using some kind of magic shotgun shells that won't completely banana peel the second they go off. All she'd be missing then is some kind of bait, which is apparently why she decided to call up Sadie for another girls' night. Only this one's gonna be a lot more interesting. Oh, she actually got it. Well, don't stop now. I wouldn't get anywhere near this freak show without dumping an entire box of high brass directly into its skull. And even then, I'd want to have a gas can ready to burn this fucker straight to ash. After all, if light really hurts it, turning its entire body into a road flare ought to put it down for good. Whatever the case, only a total lunatic would stand over this thing's body after only 2 safety shots. Are you kidding me? Dead or alive, we still have absolutely no idea what we're dealing with here. At least get some more lights on it so you aren't forced to fire wildly into the darkness when it spontaneously reanimates.
Told you it could be killed.
Yeah, you were saying, at least by some divine intervention, she manages to inadvertently sever Sadie's restraints without blowing her hand off at the wrist. Of course, aside from that, this was still a significant win. I mean, sure, it was only temporary, but we now know for sure we can knock Cropsy on his with enough force. It's just too bad we couldn't snag that pump action on our way out, but I'm sure we could figure something out. And whatever it is, that's gonna have to happen sooner rather than later, as a sudden phone call from Will and Sawyer quickly turns to panic when Sadie finds out they just got home. Who knew the monster traveled at the speed of dark? That said, maybe if you'd answered your dad's calls earlier and told him to meet you somewhere, your last remaining loved ones wouldn't have just gotten yoinked into oblivion by a living bedtime story. Naturally, this sends Sadie running home as fast as she can. But is this really the best option right now? Let's see. We have cell service, battery, and working vocal cords. This pretty much leaves us better off than 99% of horror movie characters. All this is to say, why get yourself eaten alive when you can have a public servant do it for you? I had to dial 911 and tell them a disgruntled former patient has taken Will and Sawyer hostage with an illegal SPR. Even if if we get there first. Having a SWAT team come in behind you is certainly better than nothing. After all, they're going to have to go in with both firearms and flashlights, both of which we know for a fact the boogeyman isn't fond of. I mean, what's the alternative? Sadie just runs inside alone and screams a whole bunch? At least swing around the tool shed and grab an axe or something. Jesus. Oh, wait, never mind. She found a hockey stick in the hallway closet after honing in on Sawyer's Christmas light array. Smart move, wrapping herself up in those things, by the way. Everyone knows Christmas lights run exclusively on holiday spirit, which explains why they're still working despite no other light source in the house having power. Still, you mean to tell me they don't have a single emergency flashlight or lantern in this place? That is a ginormous fail if I've ever seen one, especially after finding out the monster took your dad down into the basement. That minuscule light on the back of your phone might be good for finding your keys under a car seat, but if I'm in a situation like this, I want something I can use to bounce a beam off the ceiling and light up the entire room. Then maybe we could have seen this coming. Huh, guess a hockey stick really can come in handy. You know, until it breaks. Fortunately, before Slender Man can finish doing whatever that is, Will wakes up in time to give him the shaft, only to get himself swatted across the room like he was made out of plastic. Still, the bold move is enough to pry Sadie from the jaws of death, allowing her and her sister to rush to their father's aid. Of course, there's still the matter of the diabolical entity prowling around the shadows. Gotta admit, things aren't looking good. We're trapped in its domain with no real weapons, and right now, our only remaining light source is Sadie's mom's old Zippo. At this point, I'm thinking one of us is probably gonna have to offer themselves up as a valiant sacrifice so that the others have a chance to escape. Sorry, Sawyer, your tribe has spoken. However, like I mentioned earlier, if there's anything that'll brighten this day, it's straight up immolation. And wouldn't you know it, the Harper's basement is jammed packed full of flammable liquids. A fitting end. And with that, Sadie, Sawyer, and Will are finally free to resume grieving the loss of their wife and mother, and also probably never sleep again. In the end, all our heroes made it out alive. However, if Will had literally any amount of paternal instinct rattling around up there, he wouldn't have let some random weirdo wander around the house with his daughter home, thus likely preventing this entire ordeal from kicking off in the first place. That said, once Boogie took a liking to them, Sadie should have focused 100% of her effort on proving its existence. There's no guarantees, but given how active it was right off the bat, it probably wouldn't have taken much to get a photo or video she could use to convince her dad it was real, thereby enlisting his help in destroying it. For those reasons, I think the boogeyman was beaten. Moral of the story, it's not the dark you're afraid of. It's getting ripped apart by some vicious beast hiding in your closet, which is totally real, by the way. Sweet dreams.